Hello, everyone, and welcome into Cal's Corner. And we're here today with Matt Hayes, who's been a friend of mine here for the last 4 or 5 years. And
At
Matt,
least.
welcome in.
Thank you. It's good to be here, Cal.
Yeah, appreciate you coming in today. And today is episode 9 already. And we just kind of keep clicking through these episodes. We're getting a great views. A lot of people are following this. So thank you very much for following the Cal's Corner. And got to pay some bills real quick. And we got to start out by thanking Bill Welch here at Bill's Golden Cards and Collectibles right here in Whitehall, right here, 610 Colby Street, downtown Whitehall, or on the way to downtown Whitehall. And then other Billy Mann, KLLB Media, right here, also based in Whitehall, making your creations come to life. So, Bill Welch, Billy Mann, want to thank both of you guys for everything that you do. And once again, we're going to welcome in Matt Hayes. And Matt, let's kind of get right to it because a
All right,
lot,
Cal.
a lot of times these hours go pretty fast.
Okay,
So,
let's do it.
first of all, where are you from?
Well, I'm not really from anywhere. I don't have a
Okay.
hometown. One of the things about being, my dad was in the military. He was
Okay.
a military officer. He spent his 20 years in. And I was born in Boston, but military, you're always moving. You're moving all
Yeah.
around. So
Yep.
every year or two we were moving. But Boston is, I guess, my hometown. But I've been in Grand Rapids for close to 25 years. So that's really home.
Yep. Grand Rapids and Florida. You actually live in Florida more than
That's
Grand
right.
Rapids
That's right.
now. Yeah.
About 7 or 8 years ago, I started caring for my mom, who's got
Yes.
Parkinson's disease, and
Yeah.
so we started spending time between Maine, which is where she calls home, and Florida. So
Mhm.
Florida in the winter, Maine in the summer, and,
Yep.
and so up until this year, that's what we've been doing.
I just want to. This was later on in my notes, but I want to point this out that you are. This already came up, and I feel it's extremely important. You have been the caretaker for your mom pretty much full time, 24/7 for the last 7 or 8 years. Like you
Yeah,
said, other than
since 2018.
yeah, since 2018.
Yeah.
Other than like if a sibling would come and stay with her, you two,
Right,
yeah, you
right,
would live with her in Maine, and then also lived with her in Florida. Correct? Taking just solely taking care of your mom.
right. Yeah, she would fly up to Maine
Yeah.
in the summer, and she would fly back down to Florida in the winter, and I would drive her little Fiat back and forth, so that we had a car to use. So
Hmm.
but yeah, that was okay. I didn't mind doing that.
No,
I like driving. I like road trips.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I think anybody that listens to this podcast will commend you on that. That's really cool. The sacrifice that you made to take care of your mom, and she's still alive, but now she's in a home on the eastern side of Florida. Is that
That's
correct?
correct.
Yeah.
She's in Ponte Vedra in a assisted care facility, but she's actually in there. She's in the independent living side of it. So she's got her own room with her
Yeah.
own furniture, and she lives by herself. But she does get people checking in on her and looking in on her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
She likes the food better than what I was cooking for her. So I think
Okay.
these places have a lot better food than
Yeah.
they used to.
Yep. Got you. Well, tell me the early years about Matt Hayes.
Early years. Well, like I mentioned, my dad was a career military officer, so I was born in Boston,
Yeah.
and we spent maybe another 8 or 9 months there, and then we were on the road. So I grew up moving every 2 or 3 years, which we
Mm.
thought was pretty normal because that's all we knew. But we lived all over the United States. I was in California, Kansas, Virginia, Georgia, Massachusetts. So, and then we did a stint in Germany when my brother was born, one of my younger brothers. So, I like to tell people that I was in Germany in like '65 when the Berlin Wall was going up, and I was in Germany stationed there as an officer like just before the wall came down. So I kind of bookended the
Wow.
Berlin Wall. So you can thank me for the
Yeah. There we
the
go. Yeah.
bringing down the wall. Uh,
I did not know the Berlin Wall went up in '65. That was something that I was not aware of.
It
I
was
guess.
in the process. I mean,
Yeah.
it didn't go up in one year. It went
Right.
up
Yeah.
slowly. It started out as concertina wire, and then they added some, bricks and more permanent stuff. But it,
Yeah.
it started, and in fact, my dad's got pictures of the early concertina wire going up. He made slides. We had slideshows in our family growing up. But I've got three other brothers. So there's four boys in the family. So we were always wrestling and playing sports
Yeah.
and hitting outside. But grew up all over the country. So I've seen a lot of different people in different places. But
Yeah.
that was interesting. It
Yep.
was
I
fun.
believe your father's passed away now.
He died right after we retired out of the military. So he retired and lived maybe another 18 months, and then passed away in his sleep.
Not cool. 18
Yeah,
months
yeah,
after you sacrificed 20 years
yeah.
to your nation.
Yeah, I always felt bad about that because I had gone off to college at West Point, and I was in my first year when he died right before Christmas of my freshman year.
Wow, what was your father's rank when he got out?
He was a lieutenant colonel.
Was it? Oh,
Yep.
so
So he stayed in 20 and got out right at 20 and moved the family to
yep.
Florida.
Yep. What was your mom's role in while you were moving and his
Suffering,
20
suffering with all
suffering?
the four boys running
Yeah.
around the house. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about your brothers.
So I've got one older brother, Tim, and two younger brothers, Andy and Dan. They're good guys. We get along really well. We were all into sports, but we were never great at anything. We
Hmm.
always played a lot of different sports. We all have very unique personalities, as most people do. Um, but they're successful in their own right. They all found their own way into college to do different things.
Yeah.
In fact, my older brother, I would credit him for me getting into West Point because he is the brainiac of the family. He was good in sports, but he was also incredibly intelligent. So he got accepted to Air Force, Army, and Navy. So
All
he
three?
all three. And he went to Air Force for about a year and a half and decided he wanted to do something else and got out. But I think I think West Point probably took a chance on me because they thought, well, if he's half as smart as his brother is,
Yeah.
he might make it here. So
Yeah. Well, I have a feeling that you excelled in your own right because it's West Point or Annapolis, either one, the Naval Academy. You're not just going to just simply apply and go there. There's a process to go to Annapolis or
yeah,
West Point.
there is,
Yeah.
there
So
is.
tell us about that process.
Well, I am probably the exception. We were talking about
Yeah.
before. There are some kids that their parents are in the military, or they find out about West Point and that experience early on, when maybe they're in fifth or sixth grade, and they plan for years to get there. They're
Hmm.
working on their grades, they're playing sports, they're a well-rounded person. They're in clubs, and Glee Club or whatever, and those people usually have a really good chance of getting in. I was not a planner. My dad never really talked much about his job in the military. So I did just sort of apply. I didn't plan on going there. I had no real passion to go there. But when I was a junior in high school, my dad's like, "Hey, what do you think about West Point?" I'm like, I didn't even really know what it was, but he helped me apply, and I filled out the paperwork, and pretty much forgot about it, actually, to tell you the truth. And I tried to get a senator or congressman to vouch for me, but I don't think I was quite up to par with some of the other students. But they had this one area where if your dad was an officer in the Army, a regular time officer, they took like the top 10% of candidates that applied in that way, and that's how I got in. So actually didn't go through a congressman or senator,
That's how
but
you got in. Okay. Yeah,
that's
but
how I got in.
normally you have to have somebody like a congressman, senator.
Most of the people that
Yeah.
go do,
Okay.
but there's a small percentage that are an
All right.
at-large appointment, and that was me. So I was not your regular attendee. I like to tell people I snuck in under the fence on our day, which is reporting day, and then I just stuck around. But yeah, it doesn't matter how you get there as long as you get there,
Yeah.
and then it's up to you to figure out how not
Yeah.
not to get kicked out.
Yeah. For
Yeah.
the next 5 years.
4 years.
4 years.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Yeah.
They don't give you any time to like shuffle your major and figure stuff out. You gotta graduate in 4 years. There's no flex time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how I got in.
That's how you got
Yeah.
in. Okay. That's
Sometimes
what
I regret it. Sometimes I don't. But that's for better or worse. That's how I got in.
I think that, I have so much admiration for, anybody that served, especially guys, whether, there's a few World War II vets around, but
Mhm.
Korea, Vietnam. I was talking with a Vietnam guy last night, Purple Heart winner. I was at a football scrimmage, and I always see him, so I always visit with him,
Mhm.
make sure to say hello. Was in Myers yesterday in Fremont, and
Okay.
there was a guy who was Air Force guy who was in Vietnam and was injured at Vietnam, and so I always think anytime I see a vet, I thank them.
Yeah.
So thank you for your service. And so, what's a typical day like at West Point?
Well, first of all, there are no typical days at West Point. Every day is different, but it starts fairly early. It starts maybe 6 a.m. You
Okay.
get up, you get dressed, and you have to make sure your room is
Yeah.
what they call squared away. It's got to be clean. It's got to be neat, orderly. Make your
Hmm.
bed, so that you can drop a quarter on it and it bounces off.
Yeah.
Um, your uniform has to be sharp. Your shoes have to be polished. So you end up at formation. You go to breakfast, and after breakfast, you go right off to class. So, and it also depends on um, what year you are there. Like your first year is totally different than your other years because your first year, you're bottom of the barrel, you're scum of the earth, you get hazed, you get treated poorly. They're basically trying to make you quit.
Hmm.
So your first year is a grind. You can be yelled at any time. You have this little book, and it's all about West Point history and knowledge, and it's a pretty thick book, and you have to memorize word for word everything in there because an upperclassman can ask you any bit of trivia out of that book, and you've got to be able to recite it immediately. And if you don't, of course, um, you'll get yelled at, and
Hmm.
happy times will ensue. Sure. So you get up early, you go to breakfast, and then you're off to school. And school is a grind. School is the real deal. There, you're taking probably 50% more classes than at a normal college.
Okay.
So you've got 5 or 6 classes every day, and it's hour to hour, and there's no transportation on campus. You have to book it between classes, and if you're late, you're in trouble. If you're late, you're probably going to end up walking across the quad with your rifle all weekend, walking off your demerits. So there's a lot of stress and pressure, which is intentionally designed that way.
Yeah.
So you have lunch after school. School ends about 2 o'clock. You have mandatory athletics, so you might play um, football or wrestling, or there's a bunch of different uh, sports you can play
Yeah.
after classes, and then dinner time mandatory again. All the lunch, dinner, and breakfast are all mandatory. Can't miss them. And then after that, you're studying, and lights out at like 11:30. So your days are planned for you. They're packed. There's not a whole lot of flex time. But
Hmm.
that's the beauty of West Point. You have to manage yourself and figure out how to decompress. You have to make time for your friends and to go to somebody else's room and just hang out, and
Yeah.
so otherwise you'll just go crazy.
So is that 6 days a week and Sundays off, or is that 7 days a week? Is
That
it
no, that's exactly what it is. Classes on Saturday too,
okay?
like half days on Saturday for
Yeah.
classes, and then after class on Saturday during the fall, you have parades for the public before your home games for
Okay.
for football,
Yeah.
and then Sunday's really the only day you have to sleep in and decompress, and it's right back to it on Monday morning. So it's it's the real deal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So crazy question.
yeah.
Laundry. Who's doing your laundry? Do you have to do your own?
We
Or
don't, but
okay.
we have what we call laundry runners, and you have to take all the upperclassmen's laundry to a big bin, and then it gets done by private company, and it comes back, and then the plebes have to deliver the laundry to everybody else's room. So we don't do our own, but we are responsible for picking it up and
Yep.
getting it back.
And a plebes a first year
Yes,
candidate,
when your
correct?
first year, yeah, you have no freedoms, no rights, no privacy. There used to be no stereo, no drinking, no anything, so no
Yeah.
music. It was a
Wow.
very austere life because they're trying to make you quit.
Yeah.
So they're making life as miserable as they can for
Yeah.
you for at least a year.
Yeah. When you went in, did you think you were in shape? I mean, you've always, as long as I've known you, you've been
I
pretty
wasn't.
cut.
I wasn't. I
Yeah.
wasn't. I wasn't a big athlete. I loved basketball. I ran a little bit, but I got in shape once I got there because in your first summer, you're up really early. You're up at like 5, and you're running and doing calisthenics,
Yeah.
and they're just trying to grind you into the ground.
Yeah.
Very little food, very little time to yourself. Yeah, the first summer is horrible.
Was the food good? At least, as
The food was pretty good.
was
Yeah,
it
the food
okay?
was pretty good. Yeah, I can't complain.
Well,
We
yeah.
always complained about it, but in retrospect,
And
it
in
was pretty good.
retrospect,
Yeah, it was pretty good.
it was pretty good. So
Well, when
what?
you're hungry, it's always good, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're
When they
gonna eat.
starve
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
everything tastes good.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the difference second year? So you going in, you survived.
Second year
Yeah.
is probably your most enjoyable year, actually, because you're newly liberated from being, a nobody.
Yeah.
So you've got freedom, but not a lot is expected of you yet because you're only your second year. So the the juniors and the seniors, what we call cows and firsties, they're the ones that are sort of running the Corps of Cadets. And the yearlings, which is your sophomore year, you're kind of just like learning the ropes, and you're just out of. So it's a great year. You've got all your freedom. You can do more of what you want.
Hmm.
The academics is still kind of not quite so difficult because you're not into your core classes. So second year is definitely the best.
Yep, third year.
Third year, the academics really kicks in. So it's
Okay.
it's a
Yep.
grind. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's much and more responsibility.
Hmm. Yep. Same with the fourth year then.
Fourth year is probably the next best year because by then you're pretty sure you're going to graduate,
Hmm.
and you're at the top of the you're at the top of the school. So
Okay.
you're a senior. You're running the place. You're running the show. You're
Hmm.
in charge. So
Gotcha. I want to back up a little bit.
yeah.
Why West Point? Obviously, if you could go to West Point, you had other options. I realized your dad was a military vet,
Right.
but why West Point?
Well, there wasn't a why West Point for me. That's one of the unique things about my experiences. I didn't know much about it. I really didn't, and I didn't have. It's not like I had a passion to go there. I had an opportunity to get in, and my dad was, let's say, he was careful with money, and he didn't want to pay for my college, so he wanted me to go to West Point. So
Okay.
that's really the biggest thing about it is
Yeah.
that it was free. But I think my dad, in retrospect, knew that um, I needed some direction and some discipline,
Hmm.
and I think which all men do,
Yeah.
all young men do. And it was definitely the best thing for me. But there was no overriding reason why I went there. But once I went, I wasn't going to quit. Like I was going to do
Yeah.
everything I could to graduate and make it.
Yeah.
So
Knowing you now for the last few years, you're driven, you're focused. I so I
yeah,
could see once you got there that you were gonna okay, I'm I'm gonna I'm I'm gonna do this. I'll
yeah.
be successful.
I do have a level of commitment when I do something that I don't want to quit.
Hmm.
Now, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Sometimes you have to like fold your cards and know
Yeah.
when to say
Yep.
enough is enough.
Yep. I'm gonna jump in with this, and we'll
Okay,
come back to it later.
sure.
Was there a faith component when you were going to West Point?
I had become a Christian in high school, in junior high, um, and they do encourage you to go to chapel. So they've got chapel services during the week, and then also on Sunday morning for
Yeah.
both Catholic and Protestant. And they
Okay.
give you a Bible when you're there. So there definitely is a faith component.
Gotcha. Um. So okay, you graduate out of West Point. I mean, tell me about graduation day.
Oh,
That's
graduation's amazing. Yeah,
yeah.
it's like I mean, it's a day that you've waited for. Um, it's almost like if you're single, it's almost like getting married. It's like
Hmm.
it's this huge celebration. You're and it's basically your freedom. For 4 years, you've been told what to wear, where to go, what to eat,
Hmm.
and it was one of the best days of my life. You're with your friends. You get to throw the cap up in the air. You get to meet some big wig who goes to your graduation. It's usually the president or the vice president. So it's a great day. Your family's there. It's a culmination of 4 years of striving to do your best,
Hmm.
and to the whole thing about West Point. They're trying to build you up and to be a leader that can go into the military and be a successful
Hmm.
officer. So
Gotcha.
it's an
So
ending and it's also a beginning.
because now it starts again.
That's right, because you go straight from school and you have a pinning on ceremony and you put your butter bars on, and now you're commissioned in the Army. So
Hmm.
that's a separate commissioning service, but it's right after graduation.
All right. So is everybody commissioned at the same level?
Yes,
Okay.
everybody's commissioned as a second lieutenant, and you already know where you're going. In your senior year, you get matched up with a division and a unit and a post. And so when you graduate, you already have orders to show up maybe a month or two later. They give you a little bit of a break to go home, and then you go to your basic course to learn your next part of your job.
Gotcha. Are you allowed to apply for certain things, or are they just telling you you're going here? And because there's so many different things you
That's
can do in the army.
that's
So
right.
do they let you kind of pick? Hey, I would like to go to you know, tanks or what the 101st or they what do they let you apply for where you want to go?
Yes and no. You when you're there, everything's competitive, so you're ranked. Your ranking in your class is made up of three different things: the physical, your physical fitness, your military, and your academics. So how you do in school, in your classes, how you do in all the military drills that we do, and how you do in athletics. Um, that's that gives you class ranking, and based on your class rank, they start at the very top guy, and he gets to choose where he wants to go. They have a big board of divisions, and units, and posts and assignments, and that includes going to flight school, getting into you can become a doctor and go to medical school right out of school. You can go to medical school and become a doctor. So there's a lot of different things you can do. Aviation's big, going to medical school. You can go to, they've got Fulbright scholars and all kinds of scholarships to go to England. So the top guys can choose from anything. It's really cool. But as you go down, things get filled up. And if you're towards the middle or the bottom of the class, you might end up going something you don't like.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're high enough up, you can choose what you want.
Yeah.
Yep.
So where did you end up at?
I was about middle of the class.
Okay.
And what's,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, when I first went there, like you show up and you're talking to your friends and you've got valedictorians and you've got, captains of sports teams.
Yeah.
Everybody was like that. I wasn't like that. I
Yeah.
was not near the top of my class in high school, although I did well. And I wasn't a valedictorian. So I knew right away I was going to have to apply myself to compete with these people. But I did pretty well. I was in the top. I was at the bottom of the top third. And I got to choose what I wanted in terms of, I went armor. I wanted to go tanks. So I got to choose that.
And that's where my question, I could see why you took it the way that you did.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to ask you, where did you end up at as classways, but you took it that way, which is awesome. So thank you. I was going to end you. My intent was, where did you end up at? What division or what? But tanks. You went with
I went, and I wanted to go to Germany because during your time at West Point, they take you through all the different branches, whether it be field artillery or infantry or armor or engineers, so that you get an idea of what going into that branch would be like. So it has nothing to do with what unit you might be with, but it's just branch specific. So they give you it's almost like if you're buying a flight of beers so you can taste it. It's the same thing with branches. So by the time you get on in your career at West Point, you have to choose which branch you want to go. And so when we did our armor training at Fort Knox, I was so impressed with tanks. I thought, well, this is a cool thing to do. It's the safest place to be on the battlefield, and you get to blow stuff up. So sign me up. I didn't want to walk everywhere. Put me in a vehicle so I can drive.
Yeah. So that's how you ended up becoming a tank commander, then, correct?
Right. Yeah. I ended up, my first duty assignment was in Germany with 3rd of the 12th Cav. And it was the Cav division, Cav squadron for the 3rd Armored Division in Frankfurt. So we had battle positions along the Fulda Gap in West Germany, protecting against the potential invasion by the Soviets into West Germany. So
how much time do you spend in your tank per day?
Not a lot. You only spend time in your tank when you go on field exercises, and that's 3 or 4 times a year. But you also do tank simulating. You use simulators so that you can practice gunnery.
Yeah.
But that when you are in your tank, that's what you're doing. You're either doing maintenance or you're practicing gunnery techniques. So,
what motors are in those? Just out
being
a farmer now you get.
They're 1,500 horsepower diesel engines, and they sound like an airplane. I think there's 2 of them. I'm not mistaken. Wow. The M1 tanks could go. I mean, it was classified for a long time, but I think they can go 45 or 50 miles an hour, which is, I mean, it doesn't sound like that fast, but when you're in it, if you're going 20 miles an hour in a tank, you're feeling it because they have good suspensions, but you're still feeling every bump. So you do not want to go much over 20 miles an hour, especially over, if you're not on a road, you do not want to be going fast.
What size gun is that?
Started out with a 105 millimeter gun tube, and they improved it to 120 before we went to the Gulf War.
Gotcha. Yeah. And do you have little machine guns on it too?
Yes.
Or just the one big gun?
We have a big gun. You've got what's called a coaxially mounted 240. So it's a 7.62 millimeter, and it goes wherever the gun tube goes. So if the gun tube goes over, but you don't need the main round, and you can do it with a machine gun, the gunner can just go to machine guns and fire small trucks or something. And then it's got a 50 cal for the tank commander. So what I had was a big Madus 50 cal, which is still my favorite weapon of all time for me. Yeah, that's an incredible weapon.
Yep. I think you had Billy and I at 1,500 horsepower.
Yeah,
Billy's back there
yeah,
smiling. His eyes got real big when you started talking about
yeah.
horsepower and
It
guns.
makes a
Yeah.
lot of smoke when it first starts out. That's for sure.
Gotcha. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So here's a quick question. So when you're out doing, when you're on movements,
Hmm.
what's you must have some type of a truck that comes and supplies you with fuel, correct?
Yes, we've got what's called a support platoon in every company, and they bring you. The first sergeant goes and picks up chow and water
Yeah.
and ammunition and all that kind of stuff and distributes it to the companies. So
Gotcha.
there's people that have their designated jobs to resupply you with
Yeah.
beans, bullets, and whatever else you need.
Okay. All right. So you're cruising along, and
Right.
then in 1991, I believe, the United States goes to war
That's right.
in the Gulf.
I was in Europe. I was in Germany for 3 years. I came back to the advanced course again at Fort Knox, and you learn how to do more company and battalion level tactics.
Yeah.
And then you go to your next assignment, which for me was at Fort Stewart, Georgia, with a third of the 69th Armor. So this, instead of a Cav squadron, this was a regular armor battalion, but it was mixed with. They were mixed battalions. So you had tank heavy, but you also had an infantry company attached. So that instead of like in any tank battalion, you've got 3 tank companies, but in these battalions, they had 2 tank battalions and 1 infantry company. So, um, I was there at Fort Stewart. We were deployed to Egypt for Bright Star in 1990, and when we came back from that, um, that's when the Gulf War kicked off. Saddam invaded Kuwait in August of 1990,
Okay.
and we were the rapid deployment force for the 18th Airborne Corps. So we were immediately put on deployment status, and they shipped all of our heavy vehicles over there on a big boats, and we met them there 3 weeks later. So Saddam invaded very early August. I think it was like the 5th, and in late August, like very very late August, we flew into Saudi Arabia and got our vehicles off the boat and drove them out into the desert.
Wow.
That's how
And let
fast
me,
life can change. Like,
yeah.
so yeah.
Yep. I mean, and liking boats. I mean, that had been a deep harbor that you came into to get because those boats had to be big and they had to
Yeah,
be heavy with all that
very big
equipment.
ships, very
So,
big ships.
yep. So that had to been a deep harbor port
Yes.
that you came into then.
I think it actually might have been, we might have come into Amman, Jordan. I can't remember, but it was definitely a deep harbor.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And then you drive them off, and then are all the troops are all your troops on that boat then, or no, they flew there.
Yeah,
I'm
we
sorry,
flew in.
you
Yeah,
flew
yeah,
in,
we
yeah.
flew in. Yeah, that was the only good thing about the deployment is that we had it was going to take so long for our vehicles to get there. We had 3 weeks to be with our families and to prepare to get vaccinated and
Yep.
immunized and all that kind of good stuff. So
Wow. So then tell me, so you're deployed, and now you're over there, and now
yeah,
and
yeah.
now the war starts.
Well,
Well,
yeah.
for
I
you
mean,
guys.
well, it's sort of yeah. I mean, the adventure started, but the actual war didn't start until much later. But we spent a lot of time sitting out in the desert, preparing, doing small arms fire and zeroing our weapons and doing some gunnery. But we drove right out into the middle of the desert when we first got there. I don't even think they knew exactly where they were going to put us. But we were in the middle of nowhere. We had no resupply. We were the first unit there, so there were no bathrooms, there were no buildings. We were just out in the middle of the desert. In fact, the first couple of nights we just slept on the sand because we really didn't want to sleep in our vehicles. They were too hot. So it was pretty rough the first week or so. We ate MREs and we had a little bit of water, but we kind of outran our supply lines because we were the first ones there. It took them a little while to find us and get us supplied with bathrooms and tents and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So
Yep.
it was a little like touch and go the first week.
So, but I'm sure you had. This is where we're going. So you headed that way. I mean, you just didn't take off in the desert.
No, well, yeah, well, as a battalion, they told us where to go, but
Yeah.
it was just literally in the middle of the desert. There was nothing. You couldn't see anything for 360. You could do a full circle, and all you see is sand.
So they give you coordinates, and you're going.
Right. So we knew the coordinates of where we were going, so we sort of knew where we were, but
Yeah.
we really didn't know. We're in the middle of the desert
Yep.
somewhere.
And you're not coming up against enemy forces, there,
No,
right?
no.
You're
We were.
just-
This was all the buildup.
Yeah, yeah.
So we got there in late August of 1990. The war didn't start until February of 91.
Right. Yeah.
Or late January, the air war, and then early February. So It was a long time sitting in the desert waiting, waiting, waiting. But
And at that point, did you know it was going to happen? Or were
no,
you thinking that we're just flexing our muscle?
when we got there, we had no idea, if there was going to be a war, how long it would last, how long we would be there. So and that's part of being mentally tough. That's why they are so tough on you at West Point, because just for situations like this, you don't know how long you're going to be there. You don't know when your food's going to show up. You don't know where you're going to sleep. You don't know when you're going to see your family or if you're going to see them again. So it's high stress. It's a lot of pressure. You don't have a lot of resources, and you gotta be tough.
Yeah.
You have to be able to handle it.
Yep. And
Yep.
communication's not what it is today.
Right.
As far as you can grab your cell phone anywhere in the world and text your
Oh
parents.
yeah. No, there was no calling home.
There was no
Yeah.
calling.
You're not in Kansas anymore, Dorothy. You're
Right.
somewhere else,
Yeah.
and you're not getting back.
Yep. So when you left, you probably said, "Hey, this is where I'm going, and I'll talk to you when I talk to you."
Well, my parents, I just told them, or my mom, she was the only one alive at that point. But yeah, I just told her, I knew I was going to Saudi Arabia, but that was it. I didn't, we weren't allowed to tell anybody any specifics of where we were
Right. Yeah.
going for security reasons.
Yeah.
So yeah, she didn't hear from me for months. I think maybe 3 months later, I got to make a phone call from some satellite phone, but that was about it. And that might have been for Christmas. Maybe that was for
Yeah.
Christmas.
Wow. What was Christmas Day like?
It wasn't much different than any other day out there. It was very hot and
Yeah.
very dry and very sunny. That's what
Right.
it was like.
That's what
Yeah,
it was like.
it wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
definitely hot. Yeah, the desert was very, very warm. They did get us some good meals for Christmas and Thanksgiving, but
Yeah.
good meals compared to what we were eating before. Not
Right.
not the kind you'd get somewhere else.
Yeah.
Not what the Air Force was getting. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no! Tonight you and I are going to go to a nice Italian
That's right.
restaurant. And,
That's right.
yeah, we're not going to eat like. Yeah, that's
No.
going to be. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the war starts.
The war starts after, the air campaign starts, and
Yeah.
we're still out in the middle of the desert. And yeah, there were a few times that we saw stealth fighters or stealth bombers flying over, and you can't hear a thing. I mean, they're flying low, and you can't hear them. All you can see is a silhouette, because the sky in the Middle East is so bright. There's not a lot of clouds, and there's tons of stars, so you can see at night. And I remember distinctly seeing, I think it was one or two stealth bombers coming over, and we're like, "Yeah, go get them, boys. Do some damage,
Yeah.
because we want them to be done before we get in there. We didn't
Right.
we didn't want any resistance." And that
Yeah.
point, we knew we were going in.
Then you knew it. This is coming.
At that point, we knew we were coming
Yeah.
in, because Saddam was not standing down, and we knew we were going to have to go in and root him out.
What was the feeling the first day? Is
Cha-
it like
chaos,
you're on the way?
chaos
Was
came
it?
on him. Yeah,
Okay.
like the first day of the ground war was, it was like, "Oh, you're going to leave in 12 hours, so get ready." And then 2 hours later, you're like, "Go now, go!"
Okay.
And we're like, we're like trying to break down tents and get ready. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
typical Army stuff. You have to be ready for anything. Like, you have a plan and you have a timeline, but it always changes.
Yeah.
It always does. You have to be ready.
And then, so when you took off, then you guys, if I remember right, you guys just, everybody who took off, with tanks and everything,
Mhm.
you were on the move.
Yeah.
You just, we went through that country in a heartbeat. In that
Yeah.
sense.
Well, there were tons of divisions out there. Plus, there were tons of different countries. We had the French Foreign Legion on our left, and we had the Second ACR on our right. So and everybody's job was different. So the Second ACR probably went in. They did more fighting. Our job is a division, the 10th Division, was to go all the way around and do kind of a left hook. So everybody else was kind of fixing the enemy in place, and we went around to the left and got behind them, and we cut off all of their retreat avenues back to Baghdad. So we set up on the Tigris Euphrates River. We took all of the bridges so they couldn't get back over, and that was our job. So for the first 2 days, we were just moving. Don't stop. Go as fast as you can. Stay together. We there was some resistance. We saw some infantry.
Mhm.
There were some people shooting at us, but they just had rifles. They were like, sitting out in the sand trying to take cover, and we really didn't want anything to do with them. Just like leave them behind. We did take some prisoners, and I was involved in that a little bit. So we took them back to a collection point. But really, we were just trying to move as fast as we could.
what's this? I think you said second ACR.
Armored Cavalry Regiment. Yeah.
There we go. Hmm. They always say, if you don't know, ask the
Yeah.
question.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I use a
Yep.
lot of euphemisms, maybe.
No,
So,
and that's fine.
or
No,
acronyms.
that's what you're used to. So
Yeah.
no, that's cool. So you make this big left hook. You get there. You cut off all their escape routes.
Right.
And then what happens once you know, kind of, all right, we got this done, and
Yeah. So that was quite an experience. We had a few engagements on the way with some of the Iraqi military, but pretty light. Not anything overly dramatic. Um, but it was good and bad when we got there, because when we got there, it took us about 3 days to get all the way around and set up in our defensive positions and cut off their routes of retreat, because we knew once we engaged them with our regular army troops, the Iraqis would retreat back to Baghdad. So, but if you remember, George Bush had put together this big coalition of nations, and um, with that coalition came a promise to adhere to certain things. So there were 4 things that we said: if we can accomplish these 4 things, we will cease operations and stand down from war. And I can't remember exactly what those things were, but they were like, you know, um, liberating the Iraqi people, destroying the part of the Iraqi army, and different things.
Yep.
Basically just capturing the oil fields back, doing
Yeah.
the things that we wanted to do for Kuwait. And once we got there, and the Iraqis were just about to come back through, we were going to have huge engagements to try to kill as many as possible. But we satisfied all the preconditions of the war, and ceasefire was called. So we really didn't get to. So we had to watch a lot of the hardened Iraqi troops come back across the bridges, going back towards Baghdad, knowing that they probably would be a problem in the future. But the promises we made, we were forced to stand down. So we really didn't get to fulfill our mission. But
Gotcha.
that's life.
And those troops had to be going, what hornet's nest did we just kick?
Yeah.
Not so much the troops, but the
Yeah.
Saddam. And they're
Oh,
going,
yeah.
these guys came at us.
Yeah.
I'm sure they've seen weapons and things that they've never even imagined.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a lot of shock and awe. They didn't really know what was going to. The Iraqi army was caught by surprise. They had no idea the capabilities of the American army.
Yep.
But they were, the hardened Iraqi troops that were in Kuwait. They were lucky to escape, because the Air Force did a job on them too. Like on day 2 and 3, the Air Force took out a lot of their tank columns.
Yep.
So.
I can remember watching the news at night.
Yep.
It's 30, almost 30. God, what is this? 34 years ago, right?
Right. Yeah.
Kind of watching the news, and just, the fires and the bombing, and it was just like amazing.
There was a large strip of road, of highway, north of Kuwait City, where all the Iraqi troops were trying to get out, once the attack started. And the Air Force came in, and they shot the first vehicle in the convoy, and then they shot the last vehicle in the convoy, so nobody could. So it was a big cluster, and then they just started in on everybody else, and it was called the Highway of Death. And because they knew that those were the troops that had been raping women and children in Kuwait City, and doing some atrocities. So one of the dirty undersides of war.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were in command. Who was under you? I don't. What did you command? As far as tanks, troops, what was in your unit?
Right before the war started, I was scheduled to take over a tank company. But when we got deployed, that was put on hold, and rightly so. You don't want to change out a lot of your leadership right before you go to war, because
gotcha.
So I was not a tank company commander, but I had a platoon of armored vehicles that were more support. And so we did some. My job was to make sure that we didn't lose anybody. In other words, we made sure that every day we knew where every individual and soldier was in every company, so that if somebody wandered off, or if something happened to somebody, they got bit by a snake, or we wanted to make sure that we didn't leave anybody behind. So one of my big jobs was personnel control. Make sure that we had everybody was taken care of. If we had a death in the family for somebody, if we had a Red Cross message that needed to get to them, I needed to make sure I would go get that and get it to them in a timely manner. So during the war, I was more admin.
Okay, gotcha. Yep. How long? So you 4 years at West Point.
Yes.
And then how many more years in the Army after that?
6 years total in the
Okay.
Army. When we came back from the Gulf War in March of '91, I got out that summer after that.
Hmm. So you were, if I have this right, you had already had 10 years in, correct? Oh,
Between
wait,
West Point and the Army, I
yeah,
had 10 years. That's
yeah,
right. That's right.
and that they would accredit that. They would credit you the 10 years, or not, or only
Yeah.
would the Army only credit you for 5
Well, the
or
arm the
6?
Army only credits you for 6,
Okay,
but for like if I took a federal job at like a national park as a
yeah,
park ranger or something, the 4 years at West Point would count towards my federal service.
okay, but not towards the Army service.
That's correct. Towards your retirement from the Army,
Yeah.
your years at West Point do not.
Gotcha. So you, in essence, you were only in 6. So if you wanted to make a career out of it, like your dad, you would have had to go 14
14
more.
more years. Yeah, and when I was getting out, because when you're a regular Army officer, you don't sign up for any period of time. You're in until you either get riffed out, like you don't make the grade
Yeah.
and they separate you, or you decide to get out. So when I was deciding to get out, some of my commanders were trying to encourage me to stay, and
Yeah.
you know, they're like, it's just 14 more years and you can retire and get a paycheck. And it's like, just the 14 best years of my life. And it's like, yeah, that's all you got to give,
Yeah.
just another pound of flesh. But sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had stayed, but I made the right decision.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I don't regret it at all.
Yeah. So your ballpark, you got out at 28 then, right about 28 years old.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I went to a job fair and I got on with as a drug rep, pharmaceutical rep with Pfizer back in '91, late '91, and started my career there.
Yep.
So totally, yeah, that was totally different. Going into sales after being in the Army, where you can just tell people what to do, that's a big change. That's a big change.
Hmm. Did it help having that on your application?
Oh yeah.
West Point.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because I would think that would open it up, and that's just me, and I was at the farmer, so we had guys come and go,
Hmm.
but so I never looked at applications. Guys would show up, or you knew of these guys,
Right.
but if somebody came and said, "Have I seen West Point or Annapolis?" I'd probably go, "Oh, you're hired."
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it
You know,
was a huge feather in your cap back
Yeah.
in the day, especially when the regional manager that's interviewing you is, he was in the Marines as a younger man,
Yeah.
and he's looking
Yep.
for a lot of companies were looking for junior military officers
Yeah.
coming out of
Hmm.
the Army in the early '90s. So
So then you go to Pfizer. You start with.
yeah,
So how long did you work for Pfizer?
I worked for them for about 16 years. I got
Okay.
out and I left Pfizer in 2007.
Got you.
Yeah.
And then what?
Well, then I worked I worked a couple of odd jobs around Grand Rapids,
Yeah.
and eventually ended up working for a friend of mine's in another sales capacity,
Yeah.
selling plastic and glass consumables
Yeah.
to like laboratories and different companies.
Yeah.
And then in 2018, I started taking care of my mom.
Gotcha. How did you end up in Grand Rapids?
Well, that's another interesting story. So when I was in Georgia, my girlfriend that I was dating at the time was from Flushing, Michigan, near Detroit.
Yeah.
I mean near Flint.
Yeah.
And I had interviewed. I always wanted to stay in the Southeast because my parents were from Georgia,
Yeah.
and I was already there in the Army in Georgia. And I didn't know anything about business. So when this guy interviewed me, I thought, well, he's just hiring me so I can work in the Southeast. So when Mr. Kraft, the guy that hired me, said, well, where would you like to work? I said, well, I'd love to stay here in the Southeast. He goes, Matt, you do know I'm the Mid-Atlantic regional manager for the Midwest. So here's where you can go. And he pulled out this chart, and it's like, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana. And I'm like, oh, okay. And since my girlfriend was from Michigan, I said, well, send me to Michigan. And so I ended up in the Thumb, based
Mhm.
out of Lapeer, and seeing doctors and doing the thing up in the Thumb of Michigan.
Gotcha.
That got me here.
Yep. So and the next thing I'm going to say, some guys will think you're brilliant. You've never been married.
I've never
You
been
stayed
married.
single
I was
for
a late
60.
bloomer. I don't think I was ready to be a good husband or partner
Yeah.
until probably well into my late 30s. So just never found the right fit, but I'm still looking.
Yeah.
It's not
There
like
we
I don't
go.
want to. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see.
What are your hobbies?
Well, I love to snowboard. I play golf a little bit. I'm not very good, but I like to hit the ball around, as
Yep.
most of us do. I like to read. Actually, the last 3 or 4 years, I love reading the Bible, especially the Old Testament. I've never
Okay.
read the Old Testament. I love doing that. Running. I try to run 4 or 5 days a week. um, fishing, getting out on the boats. I love being out on the water in Florida, and eating. One of my favorite hobbies is eating. So
Hence, we're going to go
we're
eat
going to go
tonight.
tonight.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Yes. So let's talk about, you brought up faith. Tell us about, walk us down your faith road, your faith journey.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting journey. My mom always took us to church. She was very spiritual. She had an interest in going to church, at least going to church.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't a lot of spiritual activities going on a daily basis in our family. Not anything overt, but we did go to church every Sunday. My dad wasn't a big believer in going to church, but he went with us.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of set a baseline for at least our interest in spirituality.
Gotcha.
And I made a profession of faith when I was in 5th grade at a church we were going to, which was basically, it was kind of going through the motions. Like we went through this class and then they said, well, who wants to accept Jesus? And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
who wants to accept Jesus? And I remember thinking, well, we are in church. What kind of question is that? Of course we are. So I made a profession of faith and got baptized, but that wasn't, maybe that was the beginning of my journey, but that's not when I became to know Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
because that was more just going through the motions.
Yeah.
But I had some youth ministers that poured their lives out
Yeah.
into me and the other kids. This was back in
Yep.
Boston when we lived there in 7th and 8th grade. And they taught us scripture and made us memorize scripture, or encouraged us to. And they were just so loving. They were great people. And I think that that led to God drawing me to him, and I accepted him at a winter retreat in New Hampshire in the winter of 1976. So I remember they had bicentennial things on the table. Their little placemats were bicentennial, 1776 to 1976. So
Mm-hmm.
that was an amazing evening when I accepted Christ. I felt like the world had been lifted off my shoulders, and that was really the beginning of my Christian journey.
Yeah.
Through healing and knowing God and getting to know him better and allowing him to love me.
So you would have been in middle school or freshman in high school?
No, that was probably, what was that? 7th or 8th grade, probably 8th grade.
Yeah, so what we call middle school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
If you, so I'm going to back up a second. If you can give me the 2 names of the most influential Christian leaders in your life.
Oh, wow. Christian leaders.
And if you can't, you can take a pass.
Well, I would say my youth ministers, Dottie, the wife especially, she was so sweet to all of us kids. They really poured their hearts. The Howards, Mr. and Mrs. Howard, that was their last name. Very very interesting and unique people. Not your normal. They were. He collected Corvairs, and it was very interesting.
Yeah. Yep.
But I would say John Eldridge is a writer,
Okay.
and a Christian counselor. His books have been instrumental in me understanding more about the faith and about healing the heart, spiritual healing through the Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
That's been incredible. And then a couple of my close friends that I've met even more recently that have had a profound impact on how to live the Christian life on a daily basis.
Yeah. Gotcha. You graduate high school. If you could have done something else other than go to West Point in the military, what would it have been? Any idea? You ever look back and go,
I do.
Oh, I wish I would have done that.
That is such an interesting question, Cal, because no one's ever asked me that. And I have thought about it, actually, because I've always been I've never been I'm kind of tall. I'm about 6 foot, but I've never been bulky. I've never been overly muscular, but I don't break easily. I played rugby in the Army and never really got hurt playing rugby. And fallen down. I've never really broken bones. So I would love to have taken a shot at being a stuntman. I think I would have been a really good stuntman. That would have been fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one thing, I got to say this the right way. So you're in our group, our Tuesday night group when you're here in Michigan.
That's right.
Which isn't a lot. I get to see you a couple times a year.
It will be more going forward.
Yeah.
Now that I'm not taking care of my mom anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's, our Tuesday night group, we're a great, close group of guys.
That's
and
right.
I kind of call us a collection of misfits because we have, like a Brian Lane, who's this incredible
Yes,
oncologist
that's
to a
right.
farmer to a
Oh
military
my gosh.
guy to a guy who owns a sheet metal company
Yep.
to, and it's always we're just that unique group of guys. But you
Yep.
always, when I see you, I always give you a big hug,
That's
because
right.
normally I haven't seen you in 9 months or
That's
10
yeah.
months. So,
That's right. And you're
and
good about that.
yeah, and you
Yep.
are built like iron. I mean, that's the one thing about you. You're ripped.
Well, thank you.
It's like
Yeah.
grabbing a
That's good to
tank.
hear.
Yeah,
That's
so
good to
like grabbing a fluffy bear like me. You are ripped. So
Yeah.
yeah, you might have been a great stunt man.
I would like to have tried. I mean, I didn't even know that job existed, but if I could go
Yeah.
back, I think that would have been a cool thing to try.
Okay. What's next? Look at we just got the signal.
Got the sign? All
Just
right.
got the
All
sign.
right. Okay.
What's next for you?
Another great question, because I honestly don't know. It's only been a month since my mom decided she wasn't going to go back up to Maine for the
Yeah.
summer, and I wasn't going to transfer care of her to my brother and sister-in-law until the end of the year. But
Gotcha.
since she didn't go to Maine, that had to happen
Yeah.
much sooner. So we'll see. I'm going to have to take this winter and pray and meditate a little bit and see. I will be working a little bit. I think when I
Okay.
go back to Florida, there's a contractor that I know that probably needs some help.
Yeah.
I'll be able to do some stuff for
Yep.
him. But I need to figure out the next 3 to 5 years and see
Yeah.
what God wants me to do. Or
And you are in Longboat Key,
Longboat Key, Florida,
on the Gulf,
on the bay and the Gulf. Yeah.
the Bay and the
Yeah.
Gulf. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I call it
Good.
all the Gulf, but
Yeah. It is.
Yep. So where was your mom's place in Maine?
She was in Camden, Maine. It's
Okay.
one of the most picturesque harbors on the Maine coast. It's
Yeah.
a beautiful little town, very small town. They don't allow any fast food. There's only a handful of restaurants in town, and they're all local, like seafood restaurants, and Camden Deli's huge. But it's a great little town.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How far are you from like the Kennebunkport and all this stuff? Where Bushes
Yeah,
and
the
Kennedy?
Bushes, the Kennebunkport is just when you get into southern Maine.
Okay.
Very, very far south. It's farther south than Portland. So you got Kennebunkport in that general area. And then you go another 30, 40 minutes north, and you got Portland. And then we're another hour and a half or 2 hours north of Portland, and about the same distance south of Acadia National Park in Bar Harbor.
Gotcha. All right. One more question, unless
Sure.
something else pops into my mind as we're bumping up against our hour here. What's the one thing that you wish I would have asked you? What's the one question?
Oh.
Is there anything that you want to talk about that I haven't asked you?
That's your question about what I would have done outside of high school if
Yeah.
it wasn't West Point. That was a great question because
Thank you.
There's things you think about and go, I wonder.
Yeah. Oh, I have that. Yeah.
I don't know. You've asked most of the great questions. I guess I would just say that I just realized how blessed I am to have been born into not only a really solid family, but in a country where things come so easily to us. I mean, we
Yeah.
really have privileged lives in this country with the freedoms and stuff that we've got.
And you see that where guys like Billy and myself, or Bill Welch here, who has Lakeshore Golden Cards and Collectibles. He's
Right.
a military vet,
Yes.
combat vet, so he knows it. But Billy and I, who didn't serve, we haven't gone to war, who have just lived in West Michigan. Well, Billy's been from Miami to L.A., now settled in West Michigan, so he's been
So
around.
he's been around too. Good.
He's been around, but he hasn't been in Iraq or Afghanistan.
You
Last
don't,
time
you
I
don't want to
checked.
go. You don't.
Yeah.
You definitely don't.
Yeah,
Didn't miss
so-
anything.
Yeah, so I guess where was I going with that? Typical me.
Well,
right?
being the privilege we have of living in this
Right, yeah.
country, and like
Yep.
yeah, I'm constantly marveled. Any time of the day or night, if you're around a 24-hour Myers, you can just go over and buy practically anything you want, even food that's not even grown in this country. You can get star fruit or passion fruit from the West Indies in 2 a.m. if you want to.
Yeah.
It's a wild, wacky world we live in.
Mhm. But Billy and I, because of you and the generations and generations before you, basically get to sleep at night and not have to worry because of the
Yep.
men and women who have fought for our freedom.
Yep.
So, I'm sure we're going to have vets listening,
Right.
and, so
Yeah.
thank you and thank them, the men and women that have given us this freedom
Right.
to go to Myers at 2 a.m. I was at
That's
Myers
right, that's
yesterday
right, yeah.
afternoon, so.
Well,
You
the
know-
Vietnam generation, they had it really tough. I
Yeah.
admire those guys. A lot of them got hurt, and even if they didn't get physically hurt, they were mentally scarred coming back. So
Mhm.
props to them. I really appreciate uh, men like that
Yeah.
stand up when they're called on. And then these young kids in the 2000s that went to Afghanistan and Iraq. I mean, I can't. My hats off to them too. They suffered way more than the Persian Gulf War was like, a training exercise compared to what these guys
Yeah.
went through. Can't even imagine being on pins and needles every day because an IED could go off.
Hmm.
So we
Hmm.
we owe them a big debt of gratitude.
Yeah.
Anything we can do for those military
Yep.
veterans, we should do.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if you, if this is your first time watching a podcast here in Cal's Corner, you can find us on Cal's Corner at YouTube. It's Cal's Corner, and look for KLLB Media. And you just got to search and you'll find them. But our third episode was with an Iraqi combat vet by the name of Mitch Roberts.
Oh, Mitch, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
he talks about his journey and what he went through and
Hmm.
the the men in his unit that he lost, and then coming back home and trying to reaccolate and
Right.
the struggles with that. So
I can only imagine.
that's another great podcast
Yeah.
with Mitch Roberts. And
Yeah.
like I said, we've had some great ones from some really successful football coaches to now two combat guys. Steve Kelly from Wood Radio, probably the most powerful voice in West Michigan.
Yeah.
An educator here, Dan Beckman, probably one of the best educators I've ever met. We just had Chris Stark, who
I saw that episode. I watched the Dan.
yeah, yep. So Chris Stark, who is just an incredible lady here from Montague, living with stage 4 breast cancer and
Mm.
other ones. So so stay tuned. And we just, we appreciate Bill and Billy, here for making this, providing us
Absolutely.
the opportunity
Thanks,
to do
guys.
that. Thank you to Matt Hayes. It's been a blessing to me since I've met you, and just a blessing for you to say yes and come in here today and sit down with us. So,
Well, you're nothing if not persistent, Cal.
yeah,
You stayed after me, so I'm like,
I
yeah.
try that. Yeah, I try that.
Yeah.
I try to be persistent.
It was fun. You weren't too
Yeah.
hard on me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. So, thank you once again. I hope you enjoy this episode of Cal's Corner, episode 9. There'll be other ones coming down the road. So, once again, thank you to Billy Mann at KLLB Media, Bill Welch here at Lakeshore Golden Cards and Collectibles right here in Whitehall. And until we see you again, have a blessed day.